Hello there, guys. It's me. It's been a little while since we've done an interview on my channel, so I'm really honored today, and I'm going to try and pronounce her name right because I've been practicing and I'm going to butcher it probably, but it's Chaweon.
Great, Chaweon. Yeah.
Yes. From Witches and Wine, and she has her own Patreon and her own YouTube channel, and she's on Pathos, and all of the links will be available below both of the videos. There will be two, so you can find her below. And welcome to this side of the channel.
Thank you so much. It's so rare that I'm actually being interviewed, so I feel a little shaky.
The tables have turned. I have all the power now. The power to ask questions. So today we're going to be talking about glamour magic, guys, which is what you primarily focus on your YouTube channel more than anything else, right? And
that's like my lane, and I try to stay in that lane.
So I thought maybe that I think we'll start off with me asking you what glamour magic means to you first. Let's start there. What does glamour magic mean to you?
I'm still trying to figure that out because I think glamour magic is not something that's easily defined. It's sort of like pornography. I think there was a Supreme Court justice, I forget exactly who said, I can't really tell you what pornography is, but I know it when I see it.
Yeah.
So there's that visceral quality to glamour magic, but I know what it isn't. And maybe that's sort of where we can go into it. So a lot of what's, I guess, mainstream marketing practices right now, I call it faux glamour. It's sort of the lie that Madison Avenue or these big companies tell people that is trying to make you feel as though there's something less than about you in order to basically make you pay for their product, for their services, to drive their own bank accounts. That is faux glamour. And I want to make a distinction. Technically, I guess it would still be glamour magic when you see an airbrushed model on an advertisement, but I don't think that's a healthy model of glamour magic. And so I try to label that as faux glamour.
So you did this really beautiful piece where you're talking about when glamour is healthy in a way, when glamour helps you to bring out who you are underneath, and it kind of taps you into an authenticity. It taps you into being able to kind of decorate yourself and bring forth who you are and become even more of yourself through certain mediums which are applied within glamour magic, whether that be makeup or clothes and so on and so forth. It's about creating an aesthetic of self which projects truth rather than the lie. And I was just wondering if you could touch more on how you feel about that process and what that means to you.
Oh, wow. So the thing is that because glamour magic has such a visceral quality to it, it's rare for me to actually talk about it. It's a lot easier for me to show it. You know, that old saying that a picture is worth 1,000 words, but it's very useful to try to put words to it and try to put it in some sort of container. So for me, and what I consider to be healthy glamour magic, and I think healthy glamour magic is very important, first of all, because I think one of the reasons why people are so against, oh, you know, why do you have to wear makeup? Oh, you know, why are you wearing, I don't know, like a corset? You know, your waist really isn't that thin. Oh, she had plastic surgery. Oh my God, that's so fake. I think a lot of that judgment comes from historically glamour magic being used or being thought of as a way to hoodwink, to get one over on the other person. It's a trick. But there is an authentic way to use glamour magic. And I can think of so many examples of people who are using glamour magic in an authentic and healthy way. For example, Boy George. Idol, love him. And he is using makeup, he's using fashion, and he's been doing this since he was a Blitz kid back in the late 70s to basically become more of who he is. And I think a lot of marginalized people who are LGBTQ, they have been using glamour magic because that's the magic they could use and could access so that they wouldn't get killed, they wouldn't get beat up. reminds me of reading, I think it's called Naked Civil Servant by Quentin Crisp. And he was basically dressing effeminately in pre-World War II Great Britain. And as soon as he left the house, he was going to get harassed at best or just beat up. And yet when people asked him, why did you do that? Why did you dress up with, henna in your hair, nail polish, when you knew that you were going to get beat up? And he said, there was no other way for me to be me. And then finally society caught up with Quentin Crisp when he was much older, when he was like a senior citizen. And yet he remained true to himself this entire time, despite the violence, despite all the bullshit that he had to go through. And to me, that is authentic glamour magic.
Mm. So it kind of is about identity then. It is about shaping and resisting a kind of conformity that is pushed on a lot of people to look a certain way, to fit in a certain way. It's kind of a pushback. It's almost a rebellion in a way.
Glamour magic is a political statement. And it's a statement that's made not with words, but with your visuals. And society judges visuals and says, that's superficial. Oh, it's only looks. And yet we're almost denying and we're lying about how important visuals, and also the way a person sounds, the way the person smells, the way something makes you feel. We try to denigrate that as being less than this intellectual, highfalutin stuff. But it is part of our animal nature, that instant sort of intuitive sense, visceral sense. And so when you are yourself, when you're truly 100% you and all your flaws, all your nerdiness, all your geekiness, and you're wearing your heart literally on your sleeve or on your face, on your body somewhere, that is an act of true rebellion, especially if you're going against what society considers the norms. There's a bravery, self-awareness, and I think a level of skill that a person develops when they are truly themselves. And that is an alchemical process. Nobody is born being able to be glamorous. It's something that you develop. And that work that you put in to develop who you are as a glamorous person. And let's try to define glamour using, I hope, the most accurate way that I can think of glamour, which is, it's when you take something that you weren't necessarily born with and you accessorize yourself in this sort of like self-made way. So there's an artificiality to glamour. And I think Dita Von Teese is the person who said it best. I think she said that she was never interested in natural beauty, because then it's like you were born that way. You didn't really have to work for it, like maybe you were born blonde, tall, model-esque, fitting what society considers to be the epitome of feminine beauty, or you were born the epitome of male beauty. And yet glamour is when you have to develop and you have to know yourself so well that the way that you style yourself instantly, as soon as you step out the door, as soon as you look in the mirror, you're just like, this is exactly who I am on the inside as well. There is no barrier, there's no lie, there's no shame. Like, this is me. And that sort of bravery, that sort of authenticity, that feels very different. And when I was on Andrew Kyle McGregor's podcast, we were talking about this. When you're around somebody who is practicing authentic glamour magic, you feel amazing in their presence. You feel more comfortable to be yourself when you're with them. Versus when you're around somebody who's practicing faux glamour, you feel judged, you feel yourself closing up, and you may feel yourself becoming somebody else. Like you're trying to like fit in with the group, and so you're fake. Versus true glamour magic, it's sort of like you feel as though you can like unzip your pants, you know what I mean? Like you just feel so comfortable in their presence because everything about them is true and authentic and real, but most of all, like incredibly vulnerable and human. And that's something that I'm still working on for sure.
How do you think people fall into the trap of what it means to fall into faux glamour? How do you think that you get kind of stuck in that space rather than engaging in what you find to be your authentic glamorous self?
I don't blame anybody for getting stuck in faux glamour because society is extremely, extremely harsh when you deviate from what they consider to be normal, beautiful, whatever. And I think, for example, like I think a lot of us, we've gone through bullying or some sort of like, ostracization when we were in school. That sucks, like I know right now bullying is like a hot issue and all across the world, like in Korea, bullying is a huge issue. If you're too pretty in Korea, you're bullied and you need to be pulled out of school. And it's just basically the feeling of like the whole world is against you. So of course you're going to be like, you know what? I'm actually like this, but when I'm like this, then I'm going to get beat up. Unlike Quentin Crisp, who's just like, well, I couldn't help it. I just was going to be me. Most people, and I don't blame them, are just like, I don't want to get beat up. I want to have peace. And that's totally fine. But so I'm just like, well, of course, most people are going to be like that. So those who aren't like that, those who are just like, I'm going to get beat up, but I'm still going to, they are the ones who are helping to change society without necessarily, writing all the fancy articles. They're just being society pioneers, cultural pioneers, simply by being them. And to me, that is one of the most amazing things that anybody, whether you're poor, no matter what your body size, you can do. You can just be you and just watch society slowly start to move towards you. Basically society expanding because you decide, I'm just gonna be me. I'm not gonna do what you tell me that I should be doing. I'm just gonna be me, even though I'm gonna get harassed. And because I'm gonna be me, society's gonna expand, and then there's gonna be people after me who are gonna expand it more and more and more. And in that sense, glamour magic is such an important part of what I think is the evolution of humankind.
Yeah, because it kind of gives them permission, but at the same time, it kind of has a domino effect. So the more people see that they can, the more people know that they can, then they will try. And then that has a kind of a knock-on effect. So where does the magical element for glamour magic come in for you? How does that, because it's not just putting on a lipstick, that is a process of alchemy, of personal alchemy, but how does that infuse into magic for you when it comes to glamour magic?
The very first step of glamour magic, of real authentic glamour magic, is you need to know thyself. The oracles of Delphi, that was the thing, right? It was like, know yourself. So you got to know who you are. And maybe, like for me, my journey was when I was like 12 years old or something. I was like, oh, what's all this makeup in my mom's drawer? And oh, she has a VHS tape. And it was like Victoria Principal. There was like, before YouTube, that's where you learn how to do makeup. And so I put the VHS tape, and this is amazing. And so I was watching it and I was like putting the makeup on myself. Now, was it magic that I was doing at that point? I don't think so in the traditional sense. And yet I was developing the skills necessary to do magic, like the quote unquote proper sort of magic. So first I had to know myself and be like, okay, I'm going to first learn myself by making a shit ton of mistakes. Like I'm going to look like a complete hot mess. Like I am so glad that there was no Instagram and stuff and growing up, because my eyelashes, my eyebrows were just a hot mess until I was around, I don't know, like 17, 18. So it took like 6 years. I'm just like, whew, thank God. So once I went through that, and the thing is that you know what you are because it feels natural to you. At 12 years old, it felt natural to put on makeup. It felt natural to put on a lot of makeup. And not everybody's going to be like that. Maybe for you, it's going to feel natural to get tattoos. It's going to feel natural to wear lots of different sorts of fashions. It's going to feel natural for you to change the way that your voice sounds and try different accents. There's lots of different ways. But I think the first thing was that I had to first go through that process. And then after that, it became ritualized. And I think that's where the magic comes in. Once it becomes a ritual, and by ritual, I mean there are certain steps that you take consistently, and you put in a lot of non-mundane steps. Like there's a trance that I go into when I'm putting on this face. Most people do not go into a trance when they're putting on makeup, and yet I do. Which is why for me, it's very meditative. I get quiet, and there's something about putting on lip liner even, or putting on this winged liner, where it felt like a type of meditation. And people are going to be like, oh my God, meditation is what monks do. Not necessarily. You can meditate while you're putting on fake lashes. So let's not decide that, oh, this is meditation and this is the right way to do it. And instead be like, okay, what's the state of mind that you have to go into to be in a meditative trance state? It could be while you're cooking. It could be while you're doing dishes. A lot of glamour magic has to do with traditionally feminine spheres, which is housework, domestic work. Some people get into a meditative state, and when their house is beautiful and they invite their friends over, and their friends are like, this dinner party is amazing, I feel so warm and safe in your house, that is also a type of glamour magic.
It's really interesting the way you're talking about meditation through the line of like the creation process, because that to me is still art. Like makeup can still be art, and there are so many ways of playing with the versatility of how you paint on your own face. And some people paint in terms of like they create wild, wacky, monstrous, grotesque, all sorts of things on YouTube. You can find people who mix horror elements with their beauty elements. You can find people who are pushing the envelope in all sorts of ways. And so to me, it just becomes artistry. It just how you end up presenting the artistry at the end is choice. So I can absolutely see it being a meditative thing, because it's the same as if you were painting and getting lost in that, except that you're painting up here.
Yeah. I think right now, like you saying that, I just had a bing light bulb moment, which is that maybe one of the things that separates like healthy glamour and unhealthy glamour is, are you treating yourself like a work of art, or are you treating yourself like a commodity? So if you love to put on like porn star makeup because that makes you feel like art, then you go for it, right? That's awesome. Then you are applying healthy glamour magic to your life. But if you're putting on like Kylie Jenner lips because you want, I don't know, girls in your school to like you, or you want people to look at you and feel like, oh my God, she's so much better than me, then you're turning yourself into a commodity. And that is what's really unhealthy, I think.
Yeah, there is a huge problem with that with regard. I mean, we can talk about that for days, probably. The commodity element, and how, particularly women, but it's true with guys too, to an extent, like the idea of selling something behind an aesthetic, behind the image, and it has a knock-on effect that it actually makes people feel less. And I feel like maybe that's where the artificial argument comes from, like you're hoodwinking, because at the same time you're expected to fulfill this idea of beauty, right? This aesthetic, that's what women look like, quote unquote. And it's the most dangerous thing in the world, because it's marginalizing, it's often racist, it's often like one kind of beauty without exploring anything else. And there are exceptions to this, but like the mass media does definitely focus on one way of being beautiful. And that to me is that kind of toxic element, that if you don't look like this, you're veering away from what it means to be beautiful, to be glamorous, to be accepted and wanted. And so the rebellion aspect of what you're talking about in terms of glamour magic becomes even more important to my mind, because it's knowing who you are, loving who you are, celebrating who you are, and then bringing out more of who you are with the tools around you, which is the magical process. So I kind of love that idea. It's really cool.
I mean, one of the things that I've noticed as I'm going more and more into this journey is that, number one, I didn't know that I was doing glamour magic. I just knew that if I was having a bad day, that I would wash my face and I would put on a face of makeup. Even if I had put on a face of makeup that morning, I would wash it off and I'd start over again. So I knew that it made me feel like me. Like, I know that you're supposed to be you when you wake up in the morning and there's nothing on your face, and that's supposed to be like the real you. That's who. why can't I choose what the real me is? Like, why is everybody else deciding that, oh, the way that you were born is the way that you are supposed to be forever? And I don't believe in that because, first of all, I believe that we are masters of our own experience in our body. So, for example, somebody who decides that they want to really push gender, right? And let's say, like, I know somebody who is gender fluid and decided they were going to have, they were going to do bottom surgery, but not top surgery. And so this person was born like biologically female, but decided that they were going to design their own gender. They were like, I don't want to be male or female. I want to design my own gender. And I was like, that is so amazing. Like, they are deciding that they're going to do whatever they want to do because that's what they feel like. So I'm just like, that's who they really are. Basically, what you're seeing, that sort of gender fuck, that's who they really are. They are literally showing like what's going on in their brain out on their body. So for me, the way that I look when I first wake up in the morning, that's not what's going on in my brain. That's not who I really am inside. That's just who I happen to be because, you know, I just woke up. Because I had to spend like 8 hours regenerating myself. But who I actually feel that I am is when I look basically like I spend 0 time doing my makeup because I look really cheap. You know, I think Dolly Parton, she said it best. She's like, you know, it's really expensive to look this cheap. And it's like, that's sort of like how I feel when I'm wearing like makeup that other people, especially women for some reason, love to criticize me for vocally. That's what I'm just like, oh, this is me. This is how I feel attractive. This is how I feel like more comfortable saying what I need to say. If you catch me like when I first wake up in the morning when I don't feel like me, because I don't feel like I look like me, I feel like there is a disconnect between who I am on the inside and what I look like on the outside. I can't express myself as comfortably because I'm just like, I don't feel comfortable in my skin literally. Versus right now, I mean, today I decided to keep it a little bit more like low key. But I mean, there are times where my lip liner is like literally up here. And I'm just like, that looks good. Versus the world is telling me, oh my God, Joey. So there was this one thread and 2 women on that thread. One woman said that, first of all, oh my God, look at her lip liner. So disgusting. The second woman, she said, oh my God. And she put up an emoji of like those monkeys like covering their eyes. They were, you know, forget the fact that I'm going to read this. They literally treated me like an object. They were no different than a man who's catcalling me on the street. They treated me not as a human being with feelings, but as an object. You know, and that's what I triggered in them. And that's when I was just like, oh, you know, like sometimes I'm just like, do I really want to like put pictures of myself online because it doesn't feel good to have, especially other women, basically tell me that I'm disgusting looking and that they need to cover their eyes because I'm an abomination. And that's when I'm just like, well, braver people have done crazier things than me, so I'm going to forge on. But that's sort of also when I say that Glamour Magic is a political statement, and just looking the way that you look and being you is an act of rebellion. It could be as simple as you put in like a little braid in your hair and you get like an ear pierced and your parents are just like, teenage rebellion, I think, is the start of you discovering who you are. So in that sense, like when young witches on Instagram, on Tumblr, they're like trying out all these different witch aesthetics. I'm just like, yeah, go for it. Even if you're not going to do that in like the next year or so, try it out because that's how you find out who you are authentically.
Yeah. Yeah, wow. There's a lot to unpack in what you just said. So I think it's really important.
This is not vodka. This is just water.
It's vodka. Don't believe it. So, so I think it's really important, the through line there of the warping of sisterhood that happens, where women come into another woman's space for the sole purpose of criticizing her aesthetic, the way that she has chosen to present herself. It is so common and so horrifying when you really think about it. Where does the judgment come from? Why is this okay? Where is this idea of what is acceptable in terms of lip liner, in terms of how the makeup looks on somebody who is not you, and why does it become this whole mess? I mean, we can theorize about it for sure, and it boggles my mind that that is still such a thing. It's still such a pushback against other women, as if to say, well, you're not doing it right because you're not presenting yourself the way that is most appealing or something, and you're not the same as us. Maybe it's that.
I feel like there is a part of the magical community that's very much like that Instagram witch aesthetic.
Mm-hmm.
And there's also a part of the community where it's like you're sort of that nature witch, so it's like all natural.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess the way that a person looks, especially the way that a woman looks, is her entry into a group. So it's kind of like a sorority in a way, and that if you want to join like a more preppy sorority, but you're dressed as like a punk rock girl, you know, like, there's so many teen movies about this, right?
Mm-hmm.
You got to like dress like the girls in that group, belong in that group.
Mm.
I don't know, maybe it's just the way that society has been set up, but there's a criticism about my appearance that's happening more and more. And this makes me wonder, like, yeah, what's the big deal? Why does anybody care that, you know, like my lip liner is this way and I don't have any lip fillers, but people have accused me of having lip fillers, and I'm just like, why? That's like accusing me of having dark hair. It's like, why is that even a big deal? And yet I think it's because they also are thinking that what I'm doing is a trick. You know, like this concept of I'm hoodwinking, or I'm just relying on what maybe people consider to be an unfair advantage, which is my sexuality. So it's like, oh, well, she's not actually somebody who has anything important to contribute, but, you know, because she decided to present herself this way, she's having privilege. You know, she's having this distinct privilege that a lot of women have, which is if you make yourself look more sexually alluring, or what society has considered to be more sexually alluring, you know, like the fuller lips, you know, like the sexier eyes, smokier eyes, then they get an unfair advantage, and it's completely unfair because it's a trick. It's not real. You can wash it off.
When it's available to everybody. So it doesn't even make huge amounts of sense, that line of argument, does it? But that makes me wonder if there's a through line here with sexual empowerment. It makes me wonder whether a woman who is in charge of her own body is what's making people uncomfortable, even through a space which is outside of the norms of social convention, such as witchcraft or spirituality. It makes me wonder how much of that is because it's, and it doesn't even have to be women, but we are both women, but it's being in charge of your own body and saying, this is my body, this is how I decorate it, this is how I work with it. It's a work in progress. I'm going to change it, I'm going to play with it, I'm going to grow with it, and I can be proud of it. And there's this thing that happens that if a woman is like in charge, particular woman is in charge of her body and is sexually liberated and makes her own choices, whatever those choices might be, there's like a perceived threat thing that happens. And a lot of those that are still feeling under the maybe under the boot of having to conform to these ideas, they all kind of just pile on to criticize.
That definitely is a huge aspect of, I think, the way that society has pitted women and, you know, people who don't have a lot of power against each other. So I think that there is this feeling of competitiveness and cattiness that, you know, women are notorious for, you know, like I think a lot of dudes and a lot of women who, you know, like those girls who are just like, I don't have any female friends because too much trauma. A lot of them say there's too much competitiveness, cattiness, mean girl sort of behavior. And there's probably some truth in that. But in terms of like magic and becoming the most powerful witch that you can be, sexual power, whether you're male, female, transgender, whatever, your sexual power, that chi inside of you, is absolutely that regenerative, creative. It's called sexual, and yeah, it's procreative. in both physical and figurative senses, that power is amazing. That power has been talked about not just in the pagan movement, but since the 1800s, with New Thought. If you read Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich, he has an entire chapter on sexual energy transmutation. So we are all born with this power, and those of us who know how to manipulate it and who are kind of brazen about it, it's almost seen as like cheating, sort of like, oh, how dare you? How dare you take something that I also could use if I dared, but you are daring, and I resent you for that. Because I'm going to follow the rules that society has set on me, and you decided you're going to basically, take what your mama gave you and work with it. So it's sort of like the idea of don't hate the player, hate the game. There's a lot of truth in that. There's a lot of truth in a lot of rap music when I think about it.
It makes me also wonder a little bit about, there's definitely a resentment that comes in there. A resentment that someone else feels liberated enough, free enough, authentic enough to stand in their own power and present themselves in a way. So how is it that then sort of becomes this, that means it's fake? Because if you're looking at someone thinking, right, they're in their own power enough to be that way, is it then just trying to degrade them to make it fake, make it not true? Because what you're doing is true in that hypothetical situation that, this person is criticizing, and they need to be right. They need to be the authority over what it means to be beautiful.
I don't know. What do you think? Like, I'm still thinking about what this all is about.
Well, there's definitely a fear. There's definitely like this fear thing, like if everyone's allowed to just do what they want, then we won't know what we're doing, because then there's no rules, right? It becomes chaos. I feel like some people are afraid to really take a good hard look at who they are underneath and allow themselves to express that, however that comes through, whether that's through aesthetics, whether that's through their voice, no matter how they choose to do it. I think some people are just afraid to be themselves. Perhaps they've been conditioned for far too long that fitting in and being liked is more important than it is to be true to self. I'm confused as to where the fakeness comes in, because I understand there are examples, especially on Instagram, of people who've come into this community and who have hoodwinked this community. So they've come into this community, they've presented themselves as being a witch with a very particular aesthetic. They've clearly learned from the other aesthetics of other influences within the witchy path, and they've used that to con people. That's definitely something that has, even in recent times, happened. And there was a whole uproar about it recently. Someone who I'd never heard of, but was quite large on Instagram, had been found to be making out things were magical that she was selling, and it wasn't. It was very much like buying things off Wish and then repackaging them and reselling them as one-off magically charged items. So I understand that there is elements of sometimes things are not always as they appear, and that people can misuse that power. But I think that's true with anything, no matter what it is, no matter what the magic is, no matter what the power is, people can always misuse it. And it's really the intention and being discerning about the people that you buy from. Like, first of all, what is being sold, and if nothing is being sold other than this is who I am, then you're okay. And then if it's about like how to tap into who you are and having conversations about that, and there's then a platform of like consultation or books or whatever it is around that energy, then that is still an authentic connection, because it's allowing you to tap into your version of what that means. So it's a difficult one, because I can understand that people are maybe hyper aware of fakeness and what fakeness means to them, because they're so bombarded by particular aesthetics that it doesn't feel real anymore. But on the other hand, like, we don't have the right to judge. We don't know what authenticity is to each individual, and we just have to be discerning with our own time, energy, and money in that process. And ultimately, all we can master is ourselves, isn't it? The only person that we can have control over is us. And the only person we should probably seek to have any control over is us. Because we can grow, we can change, we can adapt, we can keep growing. And then how we choose to present ourselves, even within the conversation of glamour magic, is going to, like we covered already, it's going to shift, it's going to change, it's going to grow. You're going to become more and more yourself. So it's an interesting one.
I like the things that you're bringing up, and let's keep it completely real. There is something about glamour magic inherently where you are taking aspects of mainstream beauty, whether it's visual beauty or whatever, and you're putting that filter on yourself. For us to deny that would be to, in a way, kind of spiritually bypass. The reason why glamour magic can be so effective, especially for those who are trying to move the point of society from here to here, is that you're not threatening in a way that somebody who's completely out there is threatening. If you're, let's say, a complete anarchist, right? You're an anarchist and you just look a mess. You look threatening, you sound threatening. Versus somebody who applies the filter of glamour magic on top of that anarchy and is not so much here, but over here. I mean, let's face it, you are still putting on a specific filter that is palatable to mainstream society. And when it comes to visuals, that means a certain look. It means that your body looks a specific way. It's not saying that absolutely, like, you can't have glamour magic if you're not fitting that body type, but oftentimes, you know, like when you are somebody who, let's say, has a bigger body, but has something that would be considered a classically beautiful face, it's easier for you to have a bigger reach on Instagram or on social media, simply because there are some parts of that mainstream society filter that meshes with what you have. Somebody who is considered completely unattractive by mainstream society standards, body, face, everything, would have perhaps, I don't know, maybe they would have a great time because, you know, they're so different. But a lot of them, you know, wouldn't have the same level of mainstream success, and that's just the way it is. And so what you're bringing up is a sort of reality. There is a fakeness to it simply because mainstream society has decided this is what is cool, this is what looks good. And that filter is part of glamour magic, and there's no way around it. That's just what glamour magic is. It makes it palatable. However, just because you are able to go in and out of that filter doesn't make you less of who you are. This is sort of like when minorities, we use code switching. So depending on the audience that I'm with, I will speak Konglish, you know, Korean English, or I'll speak proper English, or I'll speak like different, you know, like different slang English. Does it mean that I'm pandering to each group? Or am I simply code switching because that's what I've had to do to survive in this society? So there is this fine line. And I think that anybody who is outside of the mainstream in any sort of way, minority, sexual orientation, there is a time and a place to put on that filter, but then there's a time and a place to put on a different filter. And in that sense, for me, glamour magic, there's a disconnect as well. Like, you're not so like serious about it. Glamour magic, that's more playful because you see it as a tool. So you're being yourself. Like, you have this base and you're just like, this is me, yeah. And then it's sort of like you're putting on filters playfully, depending on when you feel like it or when you feel is best for your objectives. And there's no shame in deciding this is a practical objective that I have. I'm going to apply this filter. Simply because you know who you are. And this filter that you're putting on, it's a tool. It's like a hammer. You're like, am I the hammer, or is the hammer just a tool? And once you have that nice, playful disconnection, all of a sudden, you honestly don't give a shit. Like, you're just like, oh, somebody wants to like have a ton of plastic surgery. I don't care, because who they actually are is not the plastic surgery. Somebody wants to like look mainstream, like pretty, like they want to look like, I don't know, like Gwyneth Paltrow. I don't know why I always like use her as the example. Like every time I'm saying like, you know, those girls who are like just doing yoga because it's like they just want to like lose weight and stuff. I always use Gwyneth Paltrow as that example. I don't mean to hate on her, but you know, or if they want to look like Kim Kardashian, it's sort of like at that point, because you realize that glamour magic is just a tool, then you're just like, you, Kim Kardashian, yeah, you go, you know, like good for you. All of a sudden, because you yourself, that ability that you have to see, haha, this is just a game, then you can start seeing the world and seeing that playfulness in other people as well. And then all of a sudden, it's like this weird circular thing that happens where it's like the more playfully you see it, the more playfully you see others, the more authentic you become, and the more amazing your glamour magic becomes as well.
Mm. So when it becomes less about fixating on the how we should be and what other people are doing, and instead it becomes play, then it becomes its own magic into itself. It kind of, it has a very feline energy to it, really. It has this kind of like playful, I'm gonna do me, I don't need that approval, and we can play in this space, but once people try and turn it into something ugly, it's just like, no, you just need to just walk away from people who are trying to make it. It's almost like trying to degrade it in a way. And I do understand some people feeling like, you know, they want the truth, they want the authenticity. I understand wanting an authentic path and things around to present magic in an authentic way, but I think the disconnect for me is like, it can still be authentic. You've decided it's not.
I mean, just this idea, this dogma, I think, that there is like this truth and authenticity, and it's like capital T truth, capital A authenticity. It's a lot easier for the human mind to see it like that, and we see it in all major religions, right? Like, my path is the right path. But I think what we've been discussing is, by the way, guys, Joey, she was kind enough to do an interview on my channel as well. And so if you go see that interview, we talk a lot about, you know, a witch can follow many different paths and they're all legit. So I may not jive with what you're doing, but it's like, we're all going to the same destination anyways. It's just in different ways. But it's a lot harder for human beings to be able to accept that, because it almost feels like if you're not doing it my way, then it brings doubt into my mindset. Like, is what I'm doing right? Am I okay? Somebody else is doing it totally differently and they're doing great. Oh my God, there's something wrong with me that I'm not doing it like them, but I don't want to do it like them. And then all of a sudden, like, because you're not strong within your own self, you start to project your own self-doubt and almost like distrust on yourself onto that other person. And I think that's a lot of what, you know, like, shadow work is very useful, because even if right now you're like totally judging, let's say Kim Kardashian, and you're totally judging these Instagram witches, if you can be like, you know what, I'm judging and I'm going to do shadow work on it, I promise you, if you can do the shadow work and you can really like not spiritually bypass that and be like, well, you know, I'm only judging because a really empowered woman would look like this and that. If you're just like, no, I'm judging, and you can do that shadow work, your magic will go next level. It cannot not go next level once you do that shadow work, because I think that is a wound that society has put on women, or anybody who has feminine energy from birth. This hierarchy and competitiveness based upon visuals and sexual availability and alluredness, not luridness, but alluring-ishness that we have towards people who do have power, the men.
I like that a lot. I really like it. I like the idea of that wound that exists, because I think it's true, and I think we've all been there. We've all had those moments of like, we've judged another woman. And
have you ever been in a situation where you like went into like a group of women or like feminine energy people, and they were just like such bitches? They were like really judging you, and it made you feel so horrible. And then maybe because of that, you also maybe judge somebody else. I have. I definitely have. Like, I'm not perfect. And I don't see it the same way when it comes to like people who have more masculine energy. It's like, I remember in school, like the new girl, you know, when she came in, it's like she'd have to be like, oh my God, which group am I going to be part of and stuff? And, you know, do I have to dress? Do I have to get another wardrobe? The guys, it's sort of like, can you play basketball? Okay, you're in.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember cliquiness in school to the point where I got to a point where I was so sick of it that I went and hung around with the less popular girls, and it was a whole big deal that I had done it because there was a cattiness in the group of women that I was hanging around with, and they would turn around and start picking on one person, and they only did it to me once, and that was it. I was out, and so it interfered with their power structure as well. Age 15, quite hilarious seeing power structures fall apart on 15-year-old girls, but it's definitely a thing, and it definitely exists, and it definitely ties into identity and how we want to belong. And I feel like that is an undercurrent of a lot of wanting to conform, is because we want to belong. We want people who are our tribe. We want to have friends. We want to have romantic partners, whomever they may be. We want to belong with people. And the truth is, we're never going to belong with anyone if we can't belong with ourselves first, because we're not. We're presenting an idea of who we are, which is tailored to someone else's needs as we perceive those needs to be. And something that affected me recently, it was a big moment for me, and it kind of feeds into aesthetics a little bit, is it was based around, I think it was a movie, and it was a clip from a movie, and I have no idea what the movie was. And it was that kind of teenage girl movie. And it was that the teenage girl felt that she was ugly and she was bigger in terms of size. And the male was stereotypically good looking and sporty, and he was very into her. And there was a scene where she was like, we look ridiculous together, how can you like me? I'm like a 4 and you're like a 9 or something, in terms of comparing them and their social status. And he turned around and said, you don't get to tell me what I like. And it was one of those moments of like, oh, like, yeah, like we often come at aesthetics from a place of self-doubt, of wounding, of not feeling that we're enough. So we place that judgment on other people. Like, other people won't like me if I show up as me, because I don't like me underneath. And I'm having real trouble like harmonizing with who I am and getting okay with myself. So I'm not even letting people have the opportunity to see who I really am. And if you can engage in that even through like the aesthetic of who you are, if you can step into making yourself more of who you are, that assists that process in some ways, because that's giving yourself outward permission to be more yourself, which has a knock-on effect on the internal.
100%. I think a lot of women, they have this thing where it's like, oh my God, makeup, it takes so long to do. Just, it's too much of a bother, or they're actually afraid to learn how to put on makeup. They make one mistake, you know? Like, guys, it took me like 6 years to learn how to like sort of curl my eyelashes. So it's like they make one mistake, like the first time they do makeup, and they're like, you know what, I'm not going to do makeup anymore. Because it made me feel so bad to not be able to beautify myself, that this is just not for me. And again, it's that over fixation and over identification with looks. And this is what's so interesting. It's like with Magick, right? We're always told, if you cling to the thing that you want from Magick too much, it's not going to happen, which I believe is 100% in my experience true. If you want to get more money, but you're obsessed and you're constantly like, oh my God, will I get the money? Will I get the money? It's a lot harder for that energy, that money energy, to come into your life, because it's almost like you're choking it, you know? Like you've taken like the pathway the money can come to you, and you've like constricted it just by almost like your obsessive worrying. And it's the same with Glamour Magick. If you are the type of person who judges others for being too superficial, or you yourself are just flat out superficial, you know, like there's no thought, there's no depth to your Glamour Magick, both ends of that spectrum are the same thing. It's the over-identification with the looks. There's no playfulness. That's the reason why all these girls who are telling me and constantly criticizing me, oh, you look so fake, you know, that's so horrible, oh my God, covering the eyes. They are exactly the same as the ones who are totally identified with, oh my God, I didn't wear the right lipstick today. I feel so ugly. Oh my God, I don't fit this ideal, and therefore I'm going to get plastic surgery because I'm going to fit the ideal. They are just like the guy on the street who's just like, hey, baby, and like follows me down the street, even though it's obvious that I don't feel comfortable. It's the objectification of another person, that part of them that objectifies. There's no playfulness, there's no disconnect, there's no, and by disconnect, I mean disconnection from the physical form as being the priority. If you're a witch, that witch mindset is knowing how to look beyond the material. If you are unable to look beyond the material, and a good sign of that is whether or not you judge people too much on the way they look. If you're extremely judgmental and you find that your magic isn't working well, because you're judging somebody based upon they wear too much makeup, they do plastic surgery, I would suggest that you do that shadow work on that part. Because once you get over that over-identification of material reality and you become much more spirit-minded, your magic will just go up.
It's definitely that feeling of the more you fixate outside of yourself, the less work you're doing on yourself as well. Like it becomes almost like a distraction from knowing yourself, from improving yourself. It almost becomes like an excuse in some ways to it's easier to judge that which is all around and outside of the self than it is to do the work, whatever that might be. Shadow work, learning your magic, getting in touch with who you are underneath, empowering who you are. And that can be hard because you have to own up to your own shit. You have to own up to your personal responsibilities. And a lot of people just don't want to do that. And aesthetics is a really easy way of judging other people without knowing anything about them.
It's a very easy way to judge others. It's also a very easy way to, on a positive note, first of all, know what shadow work you need to do, know what you jive with energetically. I mentioned in the video interview that we did together for my channel, how I saw you in the pink wig and like the rhinestones, and I was like, I'm feeling this girl. I feel like I would understand her. And this was like a snap judgment, right? It was based upon Glamour. And yet I could sense that this was somebody who I felt like I could understand and she would understand me, because I was like, this person enjoys wearing pink wigs. And I'm the type of person who enjoys wearing like lots of like wigs and stuff like that. Then already there's like a hobby, there's like a commonality between us. And instead of spending, like an hour talking about it beforehand, in 2 seconds, just that visual, less than 2 seconds, like a millisecond, I was able to make that decision based upon my intuition, based on the visuals. And that's a survival mechanism. Like human beings have been our ancestors survived, not because they had to sit there and ponder for like an hour about, what should I do next? A lot of it was based upon like that instant, like intuitive hit. And a lot of it was visual. The world, this 3D world, was made extremely visual to help us identify what we want to go towards and what we don't want to go towards. To deny that is to deny nature. So to me, denying glamour and denying glamour magic and denigrating it is actually much more unnatural than a lip filler or getting plastic surgery or a boob job.
I wonder if people are afraid to decide what beauty is for themselves too, as we're talking a little bit about who you are underneath and having the courage to make that choice instead of like degrading others for it. I wonder how much of it is really just a fear of seeing the self as beautiful, because there is like a real value judgment that comes from people who believe themselves to be beautiful on any level sometimes.
Oh my God, thank you for bringing that up. That reminds me of this picture that I saw of a classical Greek statue of a woman, a nymph. And they photoshopped a cell phone. Like her pose was like this, and they photoshopped the cell phone to her hand. And there was a quote from, I forget the book's name, but it's like a famous book about art philosophy, and I think it's Ways of Seeing. It's like that book that all the art students have to read. And the quote from the book was, being aware of one's beauty. Like the moment that this nymph realizes that she's beautiful, and so she decides to document her beauty. It's no longer the gaze of the painter. It's no longer the gaze of the audience who's seeing her, deciding that she's beautiful. Once she decides that she's beautiful and takes a selfie, it's considered vanity.
Mm.
When the audience, when historically the male gaze decided, oh yeah, this is what's beautiful, then it's art. What's the only difference? The only difference really is who has the agency in the situation. When we take the agency, it's considered arrogance, narcissism, vanity, being too full of yourself. And of course, somebody who is arrogant and vain and narcissistic, it's natural for us to feel great joy when, like shit happens to them. It's just human nature.
Mm.
But then there's that confusion of what does that actually mean though? Like, have we just decided that everyone's a narcissist if they decide that they enjoy taking selfies? Like, is everybody an arrogant, like douchebag if they take a picture of themselves at the gym working out?
Mm.
What's the difference between that and going to the museum and seeing a statue of David? Really?
Very little. I mean, the narcissism thing is interesting because I think we do live in a time where it's epidemic to place labels on people, and not the narcissism one. It's interesting for me because I've definitely known somebody who fits the profile of what narcissism actually means. But generally speaking, I think narcissism gets like slapped like a band-aid on so many people. It's so unhealthy. It's pop psychology. It's like, if you're not a psychologist, don't do this. And if you are a psychologist doing this publicly, what are you doing? Like, and it again, it's that degradation culture of like, well, if I'm going to label you as the worst thing you can be because I've perceived you to be arrogant. And
you love yourself.
Yeah,
you love yourself too much.
Yeah, and that's interesting. That is interesting when you think about it in terms of you love yourself too much. Like, you're too empowered. You've gone over the line of where acceptable self-empowerment is. And that's an interesting thought.
It is. It's sort of like the insinuation is if you love yourself too much that you don't deserve it, that you undeservedly are giving yourself love. Who decides who deserves and who doesn't deserve an X amount of love?
Mm.
Society? Well, who in society decided that? You? Me? Or was it already in place? Who's deciding it right now? So once you figure out like all the external forces around you and realizing that glamour magic is not only a natural part of living in this world, but an enjoyable, playful part. It's almost like, like you have an ace in your hand and you decide to use it. Nobody would fault only the house. If you get like a great hand and you just clean out the house, only they would fault you.
Mm.
Only the other players would fault you who are also playing that hand. But the thing is that if you have an ace in your hand and you play it, there's nothing, in fact, you'd be an idiot not to.
Mm.
And the thing is, everybody has several aces in their hand. Like, I'm talking everybody. I don't give a shit what society says. Like, it doesn't matter if you're like, just totally against what mainstream society says is attractive, voice-wise, looks-wise, and what your house is a mess, whatever. Trust me, there are aces. And when I say aces, I'm talking about things that mainstream society will celebrate. We all have it. And a lot of people are just like, I don't want to do that because that means mainstream society won. Like, I'm capitulating. And it's sort of like, well, I mean, by paying taxes, you're capitulating as well. By brushing your hair in the morning, you're capitulating. By doing like putting on clothes instead of going around naked, you're capitulating, if you want to call it capitulating. Or do you have an objective that's bigger than just your ego being, like unmoved? Mm. Is your objective bigger than you being like the person who's going to be like, no, mainstream society wants me to be this way. No. Is your objective bigger than you? Is your objective, let's say, to expand society so that the people after you can expand it even more? If that's the case, then all of a sudden, all that stuff it's not important anymore. You're just like, oh yeah, I'm just going to apply that filter. No problem. Because my objective is to do this. And to me, that is witchcraft at sort of like the highest level. It's all of a sudden, it's not just about you anymore. It's about society. And this doesn't mean that you just have to think about society and that you can't think about you. You think about you because thinking about you helps society. Period. End of story.
Yeah, because but again, it's that being entirely yourself, giving yourself the advantages to be who you are, to spread your message, to stand for what you need to stand for, and to affect change around you. By using everything at your disposal, everything expands. It gives other people permission, like we mentioned. It changes things further down the line. And it allows people who feel other and marginalized in the worst ways to see that there are other people who also feel other and different and marginalized, who will take a stand, who will do whatever it is that they've decided to do to show different standards of beauty, or to play their ace, like you put it, to show the world that it's okay to be you and show up as you and be in your authority, in your power, and make a difference from that place, rather than constantly playing small and saying, well, society says I'm not allowed to, and I'm gonna be disliked, or I'm gonna be seen as too much if I show up like this. And I think that too much thing that happens is a big part of that to me, because that happens in aesthetics, that happens in glamour, that happens in all sorts of ways. Voice, who we are and our personality. People are constantly told, you're too much, tone it down. And that's a problem. Yeah. And I feel like the people who are engaging in magic and witchcraft, or however they wish to determine that, the whole point is being too much.
Oh, bingo. Oh my God. Yes. If you're a witch, you don't tone it down.
No.
The entire point of being a witch, like, I feel as though the definition of a witch is taking this human experience and turning it up so much that it could literally burn you. You know, it's this feeling of taking this human experience to the most nth degree, the most neon degree. You are turning it up. So to tone it down is witch, and then tone it down to what?
Yeah.
And again, this is one of the reasons why I think glamour magic is such an important part of this, because it is an easy way for people who don't have money, who don't have power, who are young, who are whatever it is, dispossessed in whatever way. It's an easy way to go into magic, simply because it's already something that we do. There's symbology and a vocabulary that's already been developed, if not in words, at least in feeling. And if you don't have money to buy witchy things, like, for example, you maybe won't be able to afford right now to buy one of the oils from your shop. Well, you already have lip liner. You probably already have mascara. What can you do with that? So it's something that I think is such a great way to enter into witchcraft. And if you use it as a way to develop yourself, like you use it as a self-awareness tool, as a way to ask yourself, am I being authentic? Am I really showing who I am? Because if I do, then who I am on the inside will match who I am on the outside. And it could change every 6 months, every year, every 10 years. Who cares? It's just playful, because I'm more than just this. And if I feel judgment because other people are like being like really like visually focused, then hey, shadow work, yay. So there's so many wonderful things that can come from glamour magic. And maybe we can also talk about practical things that people can do using glamour magic in their life.
Yeah, sure. Well, I just want to say that from that perspective as well, the makeup tools are quite affordable as well. So there are different levels of things costing things. And honestly, some of the drugstore stuff right now, guys, is better than some of the high-end stuff. Like, I have highlighters that are from like the drugstore that are better than some of the top end ones. So it can be really affordable, and you can play with it. You can play with color, and you can bring in things like color magic into makeup so easily. I couldn't do lipstick until later on in my life, because I don't know whether you can tell on camera, I have very weird shaped lips compared to most people. They kind of go They go in like here. It's a whole thing. And so when I was later on in life, like it was something like 4 or 5 years ago now, I wanted to wear all the really interesting gothic lipsticks, right? The bright, weird colors and really play with that. So I had to teach myself from scratch, which was interesting for 3 or 4 or 5 years ago. But then I realized like you can play with how you want to affect your mood with color. And that's one of the ways that I've done it. So what are some of the ways that you would recommend to people with how they go about integrating glamour magic into their lives?
Well, there's many different ways to do glamour magic, but for me, because I like to stay in my own lane, um, I mainly focus on makeup. Other glamour magic witch types will focus on fashion. My sister buys my clothes because I'm just completely clueless when it comes to clothes. But for me, a lot of it has to do with the skill of putting on makeup. It took me 6 years. So if you're starting out from ground zero, you're not going to become like YouTube makeup guru level in the next like week. Who knows? Maybe it'll take you a lot less because I'm not skilled when it comes to like eye-hand coordination. So it probably took me 6 years because that's just me. It would probably take the average person like 6 months. But the thing is that it has a lot to do, first of all, with if you want to make makeup more ritualized. This is what I suggest, and this is what I do, and this is sort of like what I'm starting to kind of teach. Mm-hmm. So I'm gonna put out a glamour magic course because I was like, okay, there's a certain way that I do my glamour magic like makeup, which maybe isn't something that you'd be like, oh wow, this is common. It's uncommon, and I realize that, which is you can oftentimes match the astrological weather or any magic that you're doing to your makeup. So let's say that you are going to do a magic ritual, and there's so many grimoires that say if you want to invoke, let's say, the energies of the planet Jupiter, you should dress in Jupiterian ways. Well, guess what? That also means makeup. But let's say that you are going into a situation where you want to bring down that Jupiterian energy of expansion, jovialness. Maybe you're going to a party and you want to like come in and be like the queen bee or whatever. Who are you going to bring down? Maybe you're going to bring down a little Venus. You're going to bring down a little Jupiter. And that's where you can use makeup almost as magical material to put on your face so that when you look in any reflective surface, you're just like, oh yeah, Venus, Jupiter. And that sort of, that correlation, that sort of like vibing of that Jupiterian and Venusian energy, it kind of radiates literally from you at that point. Mm-hmm. So if you want to do glamour magic the way that I do it, this isn't just like, oh, I feel like just like putting on red lipstick and it's just going to make me feel sexy. That has something to do with it. But if you want to put that layer of magic on top, it is going to involve like really doing your homework. Mm-hmm. What colors are associated with Mercury? What colors are associated with the Morgan? What sort of shapes? What sort of symbols? Maybe you can do an outfit and makeup that invokes, like if you need to be in a situation where you need to be tough, but also need to be, like maternal, like the Morgan. Like what can you wear? What can you put on your face? What can you do to your hair to get into that state of mind? Glamour magic at that point is no longer about, like red is in the season. It becomes like, I want to invoke this goddess, this energy, or even a god. How can I do that so that I can walk around in my daily life with that energy, with that magic, literally on my skin? Mm.
Oh, it's like skin walking, like magical skin walking.
And guess what? You can wash it off and you can try another thing if that doesn't work for you. Or if the next day, like you do Venusian magic on a Friday, and then maybe on a Saturday, you're like, okay, I'm going to jive with Saturn. That's the great thing. You're putting on filters based upon the situation. You're not stuck. So there's a flexibility and there's a way for you to work through this life in the context of the life. Human beings, we want the security of we just go on one path and we can set it and forget it.
Mm.
About life, though. We need to constantly respond to what's going on around us. There needs to be speed and agility. And one of the best ways to do it is something that you can wash off, put on. Oh, that's my nephew.
Well, we're almost at time actually, so we can kind of just round it up. So thank you so much for coming on today and talking about Glamour Magic. And if you are interested in knowing more, all the links will be down below, and you can follow through. So thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you for having me.
Okay. So thank you guys for watching. Until next time, many blessings.